you start off with the main surface, but you want to do a blending surface on top of that. But so what I do is I go in to the skin top, and I have my original side one, and then I'll go next texture. So I've got a secondary texture. Again, I'd render this from the top this time with this surface, displayed, knowing that this surface is going to be shown. Create an alpha channel so it doesn't go over so it stays within the edges of the selected surface that you had. And that way you don't get, yeah, exactly. When you apply an alpha channel on top, it blends off using that alpha channel.
So to reiterate, because you do your top view with the thing stretched wrong, you can see where the problems are. You see what I'm saying? So when you render from the top, you'll go, oh, this part looks crappy, I need to fix that. You go and you create your thing in Photoshop. Then you basically, because in 5.0 you have multiple textures, you're copying from the side texture to the top, you're leaving that on there, but then you're adding this new top layer, and also in Photoshop or whatever paint program you use, you create an alpha channel that would fall off the top one. And that way the top part will gradually blend into the side part, which is underneath the top part. It's on the same surface.
I had two bump maps on the surface of the Allosaurus, and this was kind of important. I used a big overall one for the big creases, and then I used a real tiny one for the scales itself. Because at different distances, if you have a real detailed, small detailed map, when you're far away from it, you're not going to see them. When you're closer up, you're going to see them real well. So I did two different levels of bump maps. And bump maps are additive when you use multiple bump maps. And one of them was big, sort of crease-like things, like folds in the skin. And then the other one was the real small, fine details. Do you want to show the space wing? I've got those images.
What
those
time
are really
is it?
Good.
Just load it up and I'll talk about it, Kenny. Because
Okay.
it'll slow you down.
What we're looking at here, though, is we've got those three different maps, and you can see how they're basically completely different, especially the specular map. Specularity is something that, people will take a, color map and just use it as a specularity map. But specularity does a lot of different things. I mean, it really reacts differently, and it really deserves its own map in my mind. Here's a color map, for instance. This is a real good map. And if I sort of zoom into some of the details, I mean, it's always, even though it's, sort of gray, and I don't know if you can really see it, there's always a little bit of color in it. Even in here, there's a little bit of stain, no matter where you go in it. You've got scratchy stuff, and this was just, really easy, do a panel, use a little dodge and burn, dodge and burn a couple little streaks and stuff.
And so there's the basic color map.
So there's your basic color map, and then
Next.
here's the bump map, and the bump map is, again, it's strictly black and white, but you notice, this is doing specific things. It's looking for areas that would be bumped. It would be specific things. You can see the creases are really, really magnified, and you can see, for instance, compared to the surface map, the areas in here that this is bumped in the areas where it, looks like it would be worn off. So it sort of, plays off each other, each map. Now the specularity map is something really different. And this is something I used to call elephant skin, because it looks like elephant skin. Carl Denham sort of did this map, and we ended up using this look on a lot of different things. And this is good for a generally scratched up looking thing. But you notice, specularity is almost the opposite. It's really shiny where it would be worn a lot, but then in the corners where you can't really, wear it out, it sort of, gets gummed up and everything, and it wouldn't shine as much. These are usually really contrasty, and since you don't really have a contrast, there's no contrast control in Lightwave. You can't really say I want it to be more contrasty. That's why you use specific maps, and plus, you want them to do the different things. So when the light shines at it from a certain angle, you see different aspects of the surface. When you look at the hammerhead with the light shining on it, directly at it, all you see is the color map, because you're not really kicking back specularity. But then you get enough of an angle and you start hitting the specularity, and the surface takes on a different look about it. It gives you the scratches that are built in and everything.
And you can definitely see that on a lot.
And then you put it at enough of an angle, and you see more of the bump. No matter which lighting conditions it's in, it always sort of has something playing off the surface. It always has a different, look about it. And that's what really gives you the realistic look. Is it's not just an all-over even look. It's something that no matter where it changes, or no matter if it gets closer or farther away from the object, you've got different levels of bump map. One that's detailed and one that's, big. That way, you've always got levels.
Let's talk about comping. Here's the idea for projection mapping, and this is a a technique that's stolen from the world of traditional visual effects. And a good example is The Fugitive or something like that, because that was all front projection map,
That was
right?
all front projection map.
Yeah. The scene where Harrison Ford's jumping off the train right before it hits the bus
By
or
the
whatever the
bus,
heck
yeah.
goes on, yeah. What's going on there is a trick called front projection mapping. And basically, he's in front of one screen, but it needs to look interactive. And so what they do is they're using Scotch light, which is a highly reflective thing. And they actually have a projector projecting onto the Scotch light. So he can pass. So if you picture this screen behind me, it's almost like this is an image of the train. And picture another flat in front of me, and this same image is being projected onto here. So I can pass behind it, and it looks as though, because I'm passing between these two planes, it looks as though I'm actually interacting with the environment. Does everyone get that idea real briefly there? Okay. We're doing exactly the same thing digitally with front projection mapping. And what you'll see is the flat plane Ken just created is cutting the cow in half. Let's just render that out. And what you'll see is it looks like a cow coming out of a flat thing. So what we need to do is we need to take the surface for this flat thing, and we're going to apply front projection mapping. Okay. And again, he's got a background image loaded up from the images panel and then brought up in the effects panel using the compositing things as a background image. Now, to set the surface for this, just go to the surfaces panel and go to surface. He's going to go to surface color, and he's going to give it front projection map. He's going to pick the texture, and he's going to use the same image that we have in the background, and that's it. Use texture and render. And what you're going to see is the flat plane now will take on the look of the background because it's mapping it on exactly there. Now, you'll notice that you can see where the square is. It doesn't match up exactly. Why is that? The reason is because this is a polygon, and it's actually being hit by light. The light is hitting it at this angle or whatever. Therefore, it doesn't look perfect. So the quick way we can get rid of that, what we're going to do is we're going to turn luminosity all the way up to 100% for that surface and diffusion all the way off. 100% luminous means it will take on the exact color that you have chosen in the surface color. And what you'll see is now it completely seamlessly matches. It's like the cows coming out of the tunnel, literally out of the side of the tunnel or something like that.
No matter what the shape is of the object, it'll always project directly onto it. This is your the back wall front projection map. And one of the interesting things is with the import and export, you can sort of work while you're doing it. I just took a mesh and bent it around, and then I was able to go in and look at the background image while I was working, take my magnet tool and say, okay, this needs to be bumped out a little bit. Again, when you're casting shadows on backgrounds or when you're doing things like that, all you have to do is rough approximations. So I can take the magnet tool, bend that out a little bit more, and then when I do an export, you can see it update automatically right there, and you can see how that moved out. So you can see how quickly you can rough out the shape that will be placed in this scene, and you can tweak it and you can say, well, it's not exactly perfectly aligned with that. The problem with casting shadows is the surface isn't 100% luminous, so it's going to receive shadows. The problem with it is that you're going to obviously be able to see the shape in comparison to the object there. And there's a couple things you can do to do that. You can create an alpha channel and do a front projection map, that will have, again, a soft edge fade, just like we did with the surfaces. It will fade off the edges of this object here. That's a little bit of a pain, and if you have any kind of camera motion, it doesn't work. But another thing you could do is, just by lining it up like this, by going into Modeler, tweaking a little bit, exporting it, looking at it, exporting it, going back and forth, you can actually sort of line it up pretty close. And as long as it's close enough, that that's the important thing. You can sort of hide it in the seams. Let me just render out a frame. But again, there you go. There's your pretty close shadow in there. That was kind of quick. There's no anti-alias or anything, but you can't really see where the object ends and the scene begins. And again, I could adjust the surface on that. If I wanted to, you can either relight it or not, but let me do like a 50-50, and I'll get a little bit more shadow. I can take down
the higher the diffusion, the lower the luminosity.
Yeah, and I can take down the ambient intensity, which would kill some of the fill that's filling in the shadow area, the fill light that's sort of overall. That would give me a darker shadow also. So now you can see more of the shadow and everything. This isn't the most, brilliant shot, but in 30 seconds it was pretty good. Yeah, there's a couple things we do.
Ken, hang on one sec. The question
Yeah,
was about
that's a real good
measuring the room and everything else. Shooting plates, real quick thing. Ken, your rule?
Okay, my rule is lights, camera, action. And this sounds silly, but it's a good way to remember it. There's three things you want to look for when you're doing compositing with the real life action stuff. First thing you want to do is obviously you want to make sure the camera's exactly the way it is on the set. And there's a bunch of things you can do on the set that'll save you a tremendous amount of time. And it doesn't, and the cameraman will go, why are you doing this? And just trust me, it'll save you weeks in post. And that's measuring out the camera, figuring out the angle is, adding the lens. You know, luckily you can go right in, you know, into Lightwave and just type in the lens, you know, and get the equivalent lens. If you actually knew what it was in the first place, it would be a lot easier to matching what the lens is. Basically, the idea is you want the lights. You can also do things called, you can go and measure all the lights, but that's kind of a pain. One of the things we did for the Viper thing is we just took a white piece of board and we had somebody walk through the set with it. And that way you can see the way the light played on that board. Since it was white, you know it was 100% white. When it walked under the light, you could see where the light faded out. And that way you could kind of fake it really quickly just by seeing that. As far as if there's a camera track in there, that was actually a Ultimat memory head. But if a camera track, basically if you could triangulate it, find two objects in the room that are visible during the scene, you know, in the camera, and measure out those three things, and then create, you know, roughly two objects in Lightwave that you can use to track the camera. So when you pan, you can, you know, keyframe the camera so it rotates like the real camera. I mean, the whole idea is that you want to have the virtual set here as close to the real set as possible. And again, you know, you can see how easily you can get away with just roughing out, you know, a bumpy looking surface instead of having to go in and measure the rock wall, you know.
Right.
There's a lot of ways of doing that. In front projection mapping, there's two different ways. Now the action part of it is the lights, camera, action. So you've got the lights in the camera. The action is more the interaction. And that's the stuff where it really gets interesting. I mean, does he go behind a wall here? And if he does he cast a shadow? Does he bump into something on the set? You know, those things are all, you know, real important. And again, those can be faked really easily. There's two types of objects you can make in here. There's one that's just a simple box with an alpha channel, or a simple box that's placed there, and that'll be for things walking behind other objects. Or you could do, you know, object that's going to have shadows cast on it, or it's going to be interacting with. And those you want to roughly guesstimate what the shape is like of the actual object and position.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. If there's no other questions, Kenny, I'll be around for a little bit. We'll do this because they have to take the machine. Thanks a lot, everyone, and we'll see you next time.